Patch 1320 had hit the live servers about, what, 16, 18 hours ago at this point, at least at the time of recording this video. And to nobody's surprise, what a fucking disaster. It was really bad. Just to give you an idea as to how bad it was, this over here is Milk. Well, actually, it's me down here. Hello. But my face is covering Milk's camera. But as you can see on the top left here, this is actually a VOD from Milk's games from earlier today. And he has an average placement of 2.9 over like 10 games. Now, if you might be going like, hey, Milk is a really, really good player. And he is. He's a very fantastic player. And you might be going, wow, he must have played a bunch of different variations and lines to get to this average placement. And no, he fucking did not. He not only got to this average placement playing nothing but Tf Reroll, but he also got to play Tf Reroll contested basically every single game, 2 ways, 3 ways, 4 ways, even 6 ways. I think at a certain game, like you name it, it was definitely a fucking spectacle to watch. But even in here, as you can see, he's contested right now. Contested every single game, still with this insane average placement. Basically only bought forward a single game, and it was a 5th because TF can actually support like 4 players at a time because TF2 is so stable. Absolute disaster. Now, if you're wondering how this could have even happened or why this happened in the first place, basically, if we just go over the patch notes here, we look over at the multicasters, there was a slight rework that had happened with multicasters, and we can read it over here, where it went from, instead of a 2 to 4 trait, it went from 2, 3, 4, but the bigger change is that now that the way the multicasters worked is that their additional cast now just has decreased reduced effectiveness as you move up the vertical trait. So now for multicaster is just very fucking strong. If you were anything like any of us who played the PvE because they were a little impatient, they wanted to play on the new patch immediately, it took you less than a game or two to realize, hey, this multicaster shit is not okay. It is fucking broken. Now, a lot of people on Twitter, at least, were like flaming the dev team today for this patch in particular because of how unplayable this game felt, at least today during the 16 18 hours that this patch has been live. But what I will say though is that you have to understand a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes and why these changes were even allowed to go through in the first place. More specifically, if you go over here, I will link this in the description below because I think it's a very good read. But Boise's basically goes through like what the behind the scenes is and why this is the case, right? Like, why do we have patches that seems so egregious yet they still make it onto live? So the big thing to take in mind from this patch, or from this thread rather, and again, I'll link this in below if you want to read it, but the big thing, to at least my biggest takeaway, was that the team has to log the text changes of the next patch 12 days before it goes live. They can change the numbers 7 days before it goes live. That is absurd. 12 days before it goes live. So imagine you are working on the balance team, and then your office is like, hey guys, patch comes out, coming out in 12 days. What should we do? What the fuck? How the fuck are you gonna, like, it's so bad because nobody can predict the meta in 12 days. No, I don't care who you are. Dish Soap, Prestivant, Setsuko, Soju, Robin Songs, who cares who you are? Nobody is predicting a patch in the meta in 12 days. Most of these players, I would bet money, cannot even predict the patch within like a couple days, right? 12 days is an insane amount of time for the meta to evolve, especially in a game like TFT where there's so many permutations, so many variations. Now, this 12-day cycle exists because TFT has to work inside of the League of Legends client, right? So to me, at least to how it sounds like to me, is that until TFT gets its own client, we're kind of stuck. We're going to have this problem. This will be a reoccurring problem where a patch needs to go live and it's just not congruent with what is currently the state of the game, and then they have to deploy a B patch, which great they're doing it, but they're stuck within these constraints, right? So again, like, if you're like okay, first off, if you're flaming the TFT dev team, like, what the fuck? Go outside, please, touch some grass, like, go to a social gathering, get some, learn some social skills, because like, you're clearly lacking in that department. But like, please, man, like, it's a terrible constraint to be working with here. And like, you have to be pretty willfully ignorant to, or maybe you just don't know, but it's very obvious, at least if you do a slight bit of research, to see just how hard the TFT dev team is working to try to get the game as good as it can be. Now, obviously, with that being said, a B patch has already been addressed. B patch has already been addressed, and they are working to deploy it tomorrow, and quite literally tomorrow as in today, because it's 5 in the morning. It's probably going to come out within a couple hours at the time of recording this video. Hopefully by the time you're watching this, the beat patch is already out. And if you don't know what the beat patch is, very quickly, here are the changes. This is from Warthog's Twitter. I will link this as well in the description below if you want to go check it out for yourself. But very briefly, we can go over this. Azir, a very slight attack speed buff because he is still very unplayable. Fiora Kai'Sa also gets slight buffs as well. This is mostly because that the Fiora Kai'Sa line, the 4 challenger line that was very being abused like a patch or two ago, is suddenly not nearly as good as it used to be. And actually, it's basically unplayable right now. So slight buffs, very nice to see. Big changes to Nilah, very good to see. Cleave damage getting very large nerfs, actually 10% down with AD on the cleave damage from 65 to 55. And the stacking attack speed gets reduced by 2%. Now, that is a lot. I don't really know how to really put it in a way for you to understand the gravity of that change. That every time Nilah whips her fucking whip, right? Whips her whip, right? Right? Every time she whips it, that's minus 1080. Minus 1080, minus 1080, minus 1080, minus 1080, minus 1080, minus 1080. On top of that, her attack speed is reduced, so she's whipping a little less. Bro, that is a sizable nerf. This Nilah unit, I'm not going to say she's unplayable, but she's going to feel a lot worse. Like, a lot worse. On top of this, we also have, I'm going to skip to the end here because it's actually really huge. Scoped weapons is disabled. So, I mean, scoped weapons, I mean, it kind of deserves to be disabled. It's a cool augment. It's a cool concept. But is it healthy for the state of the game? The fact that it's an auto pick, you just force Nilah or Mordekaiser? No, it's really not. So, good to see the scoped weapons getting disabled. And Nilah will be a lot less playable now compared to how she currently is. Does she completely kill her? I don't know. But it's a big nerf. It's a sizable nerf. Also, thank God, as we can see here, TF is getting a large base damage nerf. If you can't really, do the math real quick, that's what, 25 AP at tier 1, 40 AP on tier 2, 55 on tier 3. That's a lot. That is a lot of AP to be losing. So Twisted Fate's gonna feel not nearly as good as he currently does now. And on top of that, for multicasters, the trade itself, the reduced effectiveness is getting nerfed to 25% reduced effectiveness instead of 20% at the top of 4 verticals. So it's, again, multicaster a lot worse than what it is now. And finally, not only that, but Absolution, Radiant Redemption is also getting a nerf, a very sizable nerf as well, an extra 5% damage reduction nerf and 100 HP less. So you're losing a third of the HP you would have gotten out of this augment, and then you're losing 33% of your damage reduction. That's a lot. That is a lot. This basically kills the TF comp, in my opinion. I don't think TF will be playable after this. It's very possible that maybe it's still fine in the right scenarios, and then maybe instead of playing around Galio, you play around a different tank front line, maybe J4, I'm not really sure, but it's very possible instead of playing TF, multicaster carry, you play like Vel'Koz maybe, I'm not really sure, but regardless, will this comp sustain 4 players in a lobby? No, it won't. So really glad to see these BPAS changes going in basically immediately. I mean 24 hours, but that's basically immediately in fucking game dev terms. So really cool to see. Some other slight changes as well. Petricite Shackles, or sorry, we should go in order here, sorry. Demon Flare getting a slight damage amp nerf. It's not really that sizable, but if you think about it within percentages, like 0.5% is nothing to sneeze at. It's like what, 8 to 9%, something like that. I think I'm doing the math right. I might be wrong, but it's size 1/6, right? It's sizable. It's sizable. Also, Petricite Shackles as well is also getting a bit of a nerf as well, going from 22 down to 18%. This is what I believe is to address vertical Demacia, because Tf Reroll is actually surprisingly sort of picking up a bit of steam already. It was picking up a bit of steam on the PvE servers yesterday during the practice scrims, but on top of that, with Petricite Shackles, it basically enables the crap out of it. So seeing Petricite Shackles getting a bit of a nerf here, I think it's deserved and something nice to see. Now, with all this said, we got through the changes, why the changes happened, why they were necessary, what caused them. Good. What does this mean for the future? What can we predict out of the meta? Let's talk about it a little bit. There are a couple things to note out of here. I think realistically, for me personally, I still think Ionia Vanquishers will probably still be an S tier comp. Basically, Xayah kind of went untouched. Vanquishers in 6 Vanquishers specifically got nerfed, but 2 and 4 didn't. And then on top of that, I think Ionia got a slight nerf, but it's nothing to really be like, ooh, Ionia's unplayable, right? Nilah was sort of the secondary primary carry of this composition though, but that doesn't mean that Xayah is going to be bad by any means. It just means that she's going to have a little less support in terms of cleaning up the board. So Is it still is it like unplayable? No, I still think actually that it's going to be one of the more consistent comps, at least within the coming patch. On top of this, Mordekaiser I believe is on the rise again because he kind of just didn't get touched. I think Mordekaiser, at least right now, also still feels very playable. He doesn't feel bad by any means. So I still think we'll see a lot more Mordekaiser coming out of the 4-cost pool when it comes to primary carries in your late game boards. Fiora Kaisa as well, just went from unplayable to kind of playable. I still don't know how I feel about 4 challengers. I think it's very weak compared to other 4-cost boards you could be playing. But nonetheless, if you do have really strong augments for it and a really good spot for it, stuff like Healing Orbs, LDP, Fiora 2, Kaisa 2 on 7, maybe even a lucky Aatrox on 7, right? I mean, you should play it from that spot, right? And if you have like BIS, BT, Titans, maybe Night Harvester, maybe BIS Fiora changes because of the way that they changed the way that her ability works, I'm not really sure. But nonetheless, I still think Fiora Kaisa isn't unplayable. It's just playable, but you have a lot more stricter conditions to try to run such a board. But there's a board I actually think we'll start seeing a bit more of, which is going to be this Nautilus MF Reroll line. This is actually, funny enough, the first board I ever played on PBE, like vertical strategist with Nautilus and MF Reroll. For those of you who don't know, this board actually already has a pretty insane average with a very insane top 4 rate. Obviously you can play it within 7 Bilgewater as well, but it's very difficult to hit 7 because this means you're hitting a GP on 7. Very difficult to find. But if you happen to find it, great, play it. If not, then maybe I would suggest playing strategist as well. That's going to be my personal default here, where especially with a very slight Azir buff, maybe it's good enough. But basically, MF becomes your primary carry, Azir here with the Shiv, and you just play here Nautilus as you maintain a very simple, straightforward line. Obviously, this Twisted Fate can be anything else, any Bilgewater unit, Nila, it can be GP in a perfect world, but you get the idea. I still think this board will be very, very strong in the upcoming patch. Will it be S tier? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how stable an MF2 and Nautilus 2 is. It's very difficult to try to gauge the strength of a board when everybody in the lobby is playing TF and you're getting ran over every single time. But nonetheless, I still think once these nerfs go through for TF, this board will start to shine a lot more. Finally, with scoped weapons being disabled, I do think this might actually have a weird inverse effect where people might even be more incentivized to play something like TF Legend Pandora's, and then you just get double RFC Mordekaiser instead, and you play that as your win condition. Do I think that's going to be a viable strat? I'm not really sure yet, but the fact that Scope Weapons is now not in the game, it means that it's a little harder to try to hit, you know, the perfect Mordekaiser setup or the perfect Nila setup, right? Getting that extra range on your unit is a very, very strong thing to have, especially on units like Mordekaiser who are super safe and can just bonk away in the fucking backline, right? But hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you guys all later. Hopefully I'll be streaming once the patch goes live, but until then, take care guys, happy climbing, and I will see you all later. Bye bye.